Hello, everyone, and welcome to the JAM Yearbook. And maybe we should call it the new JAM Yearbook because now you can see us. Sorry, but that's the way it is. Like it or not, this is us. I'm Matt.
And I'm Jim, and we are doing this because we are celebrating our 100th episode. There are 99 episodes where it's just us talking. We kind of got tired of looking at each other, so we decided that you had to look at our ugly mugs as well. It's not an
Yeah,
option anymore.
yeah. And we want to thank everybody for tuning in and listening up to this point. We know there's a lot of different ways you can be spending your time, and we want to thank you for spending it with us.
Yeah, we will have this up on YouTube, so you can check our podcast out there. All of our audio is also on YouTube, so you can go back and check that out, even if you just want something to listen to. But if you're going to go to YouTube and check us out, we have to do that thing where we ask you to like it, hit the subscribe button, because that's probably the best thing you can do to help us.
It's what everybody does,
It is. It is.
right? And if you are new to the show, check out all the older episodes too. We'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, we would. And
Oh,
long
sorry,
pause.
sorry, long pause.
Yes, we're new to doing this on video, so the audio, if you're just used to that version, is probably going to sound a little different. We tend to have a lot of notes when we do just audio, and we're breaking away from that. We might mess up. If we do, this is all going to be very natural for us, and there's nothing else we can do. I feel like I'm looking over here. I'm not looking at the notes. I'm looking at Matt on my screen, and the notes are over here. So if you think I'm
Yeah.
reading this, I'm not. I'm looking at Matt, and I'm going to have to get used to this.
Yeah, there's like everything's been changed and swapped. This is not usually where I am, but there's something going on the other end of the room that I
Yeah,
didn't want to disturb.
yes.
So now I'm here. Everything's different. The lighting, the microphone sound, it's all a little bit different. Most importantly, though, probably more for me, gonna have to watch the swearing now that we're on YouTube. So we'll try to work on our friggins and our feckins instead of, the more punchy words.
Yeah, I introduced Matt to the word feck this week because they get away with it on television over here in the UK. So you can actually say you're pretty feckin' stupid and it does not change the rating of anything. It's PG. Cool.
And I
Yeah.
didn't know that was a different word. I thought it was just an accent,
No,
making it sound like a different word. But hey,
it
I'm all
isn't.
for
It
it.
isn't. So let's get into it. We decided to spend some time deep diving into genres. Our last episode that was audio was covering album anniversaries for January and February, and we're alternating album anniversaries and subject shows kind of right now. We did emo just before we did the album anniversary, so that's all on the audio show. But now we're here, and we are going to start with new wave as we go to YouTube and video and this type of podcasting.
And we promise you that is going to be the last time we say emo for a while. We've been banging that drum a little too
Yeah.
much. So what is new wave, Jim? Right? Like a lot of these genres that hit hard and fast right off, it's a scene as well as a genre. It emerged in the late 70s, went into the 80s quite a bit. It blended the raw energy of punk, but it had the pop sensibilities along with a lot of experimentation, especially
Hmm.
with electronic music, keyboards, synthesizers, drum machines for some bands. It had the raw, youthful energy of the punk and that production of pop. It was a lot more slick. It was undeniably catchy.
Yeah. It definitely grew out of that punk movement because I kind of think that new wave itself was a natural shift to try to find its way from being punk to being accessible to the radio.
Yeah, and the new wave artists kind of wanted that,
Hmm.
right? Because punk, new wave comes from punk, which was a catch-all, big umbrella genre for everything that just wasn't mainstream or didn't want to be, blah, blah, blah. And then punk just, you know what punk is, right? You say it, you hear about this energy, this aggression, and just as hot as it came, it just splintered. And new wave was one of those that got ejected, and then new wave became this umbrella term for everything that wasn't welcome under the punk umbrella
and
anymore.
and that's it. It didn't have a real sound in itself. The name that we have is Seymour Stein. He was the co-founder of Sire Records, and he signed bands like the Talking Heads, the Pretenders, the Ramones. He must have gone to CBGBs if he signed the Talking Heads
He
and the
did. Yes, he
Ramones.
did.
Madness, the Smiths, Madonna, and he launched this "Don't Call It Punk" movement because he thought that that term punk had become dangerous for new music. And he didn't think that people were attracted to it. He wanted to attract new listeners to this sound that was coming out. And that's where new wave came from. The film, the what's the metal film, like The Decline of the Western Civilization?
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
There was a little clip I saw of that last week when I was researching for the show. And there is a rumor that new wave was kind of brought along as a title for music that had a new sound. So, kind of like the next generation of music that's coming along. You had your 60s rock, you had your 70s music rock. I mean, the funny thing to me is I just call that classic rock now, so I don't know what they called it in
I know, isn't it?
1970.
It's so weird, so
It's
weird.
almost like, no, that still is classic rock and the other is the oldies and this is new wave. So I don't know. But commercial radio would not touch punk. It was too abrasive, and a lot of the subject matter of it was really in your face. So new wave was a way to break away from that. And as you already alluded to, that polished sound broke away from the abrasiveness of punk.
Yeah, and when you just say new wave, probably depending on your generation or just even separated by a couple years, it can make people think of different things. Because again, it is that huge umbrella. But what is new wave? Anybody giving a serious answer to that question probably isn't wrong, right? It's the
Yeah,
power
yeah.
pop in the form of Elvis Costello. It's still kind of punky and snarky and sneery, but it doesn't feel dangerous, but it still feels raw. It's alt rock like Dio or
The Dio.
Dio. You know what I just listened to today?
Yeah.
No,
Hey.
but it's art rock like Devo, right? Which I've been listening to a lot of as well. And then synth pop was sprinkled in there until that kind of ejected on its own because it got really big, like
Mhm.
Flock of Seagulls, Human League, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely as it grew, it expanded into the 80s and it didn't die down. The sound shifted. But the funny thing is that the bands that you talk about, Devo, Elvis Costello, Human League, looking up behind you, those albums, you got
Oh
Blondie,
yeah.
Talking Heads, you got the Go-Go's. When I was looking up stuff about new wave, I never in the back of my mind really put the Go-Go's into new wave, but
No, I
they
never did either, but they grew out of the LA punk scene.
they did, and they were part of falling under that umbrella like so many bands. It was so big that when Tom Petty first came out, people thought Tom Petty was new wave, his first album, because he sounded different. The funny thing is, now to me, he sounds like classic rock, and I don't know what I would have called it back then. That's why I was thinking
Yeah,
about
yeah.
what did they call it?
But I can understand that because Tom Petty, it's got that jangly pop, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is somewhat related to the Pretenders sound, and the Pretenders were also considered new wave.
They were.
So I can see how people, because again, new wave, it was everything
Well,
all at once. It was what was young and popular, and this is the pop music of our youth,
and it was something that
really.
everybody kind of wanted a piece of. Glass Houses, the Billy Joel album, is said to dip into new wave. And Billy Joel played some synthesizer. Excuse me. Billy Joel played some synthesizer a little bit on that. I don't even know if
Mhm.
it was on Glass Houses, but the first song that comes to my mind is Pressure when I think
Yeah, I
about
think,
him.
yeah, Allentown. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But then also Donna Summer. And I was surprised to see that it had mentioned that even Linda Ronstadt, I didn't go listen to it. I didn't have the time. I can't imagine that Linda Ronstadt being
Oh, really?
a
I might
new
have to
wave
figure that
artist,
out.
but there was an album she released around the late 1970s, early 1980s that dipped into that.
That kind of makes sense though, because she tended to be a chameleon.
Yeah.
She was an artist. She would kind of like Bowie, probably not Bowie stature, but she would dip in to here and dip into there.
But I think it was because you had these bands that weren't abrasive and they were different than what was coming along. And when you think about radio in the 1970s and what was coming out of it, you had disco, you had your now what we call classic rock, your Journey, your Kansas, your Led Zeppelins, and then you had your AM radio stuff going on, your pina coladas and your
Barry Manilow.
your yacht rock, all of that yacht
Yeah.
rock movement that was all over the airwaves. So trying to get something kind of rock and roll in there, but that wasn't still part of that same scene, they had bands like the B-52s come along. And these bands threw
Hmm.
in those dashes of funk, reggae, and a lot of them leaned on a 60s sound. Even kind of like the late 1950s Skittle rock is in there in places. The garage rock from that time. And everything else that pretty much wasn't nailed down, New
Yeah, they threw
Wave
the
was,
kitchen sink in
yeah,
there.
they were trying to take it.
New Wave made a point to be modern, and a lot of bands were intentionally being quirky, humorous. Just it had that pop approach to it. And you can't forget the colorful fashion, right? What is the 80s known for? This led into the 80s just being a I almost swore there. I held myself
That's
back.
fine. Yeah.
It held the 80s back from being they didn't hold the 80s back. It propelled it to being a peacock.
Well, it might
Right?
have actually been the precursor to the Aquanet we were
Yeah.
going to see from the hair metal
Yep.
coming. The hair got bigger and
And the
bigger. Yeah,
hairstyles, the
yeah, the
flock of seagulls,
hairstyles.
the
Yeah.
hairstyles. Oh my God.
Well, there was a lot of makeup. There was a lot of.
Yeah, there was.
I mean, even the term avant-garde can be used when talking about new wave because some of the new wave scene was in many ways, and the Talking Heads definitely were part of this performance
Hmm.
rock. It wasn't just music, there was a visual aspect because it was coming along. We'll get into this in a minute, but it was coming along with the birth of music video at the same time. But
Sorry.
no, that's fine. Before we get to that, we have to think about punk and how it initially embraced everything that wasn't considered normal by the time the Sex Pistols had arrived. And there was a stereotype about punk that had emerged. And I'm sure that stereotype, when we say punk, like you talk about what people think when they hear new wave, they've all got their own version of it. But that
Yeah.
stereotype of punk is pretty ingrained. And I'm sure it's
Yeah.
people, you say punk and people see Sid
Safety
Vicious.
pins.
Yeah, they
Yes. Yeah.
yeah. Or a Ramones
Yep.
t-shirt that you got at the record store.
Yeah. Ripped jeans, a trickle of blood here and there, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
New Wave it kept alive that punk ethos of anybody can start a band.
Hmm.
And what punk kind of did, because punk came out of proto punk, which had a lot to do with, again, you said it, the 60s garage rock, surf rock. You got your Iggy, your MC5, and they all mashed it together. But punk and then later on new wave, it was just the youth saying, "Hey, you got another great Led Zeppelin album. That's fine. Throw me some more Steve Miller, whatever you got. Foghat, that's great. My dad's going to be happy. He's going to be impressed. What do you got for me?
What you got for me?
What,
Yeah.
where's the fun?" And then punk came along and new wave. It was really against rock elitism
Hmm.
and just showing prog pretentiousness, the middle finger.
Well, I think
And
another
it's kind
part.
of
Oh, go ahead.
no, you
Well, I think
see,
another
this is where
part.
we perform our Heckle and Jekyll
This is what
routine.
we do because we're going to talk over each other.
Yeah,
We can't just go
exactly.
edit this out anymore.
No, no.
There's another part of punk that doesn't exist that new wave brought out in people, and that was sexy. There's no such thing as sexy in punk. I mean, I'm sure there's some women out there and some guys
It
out
depends
there
on
who,
your definition,
yeah,
brother.
their definition, they think it's sexy. But when I think of punk, and I think about Sid Vicious and Johnny Rotten and the Ramones and all those guys in those jeans and leather jackets, the one thing that does pop in my mind was it's probably 2 or 3 days without a shower, probably a lot of drinking, drugs, and
Yeah,
new
I'm
wave.
sure they had competitions to see how long somebody could not shower.
I bet you they did, and new wave kind of cleaned that up, and there was some kind of nerdy, rigid sex appeal to it.
Hell yeah,
Instead of
there
the
was.
gyrating hips, there was this kind of rigid robotic dancing that became popular. But that was
Yeah,
a fad that as dancing fads and things like that take over. And there was something about that that had sex appeal.
yeah, because really, as far as punk, you're gonna mosh or you're gonna pogo, and that's about the
It
extent of dancing
was
you're
called
gonna get out
slam
of punk.
dance. I think it was slam dance
Slam
back
dance.
then.
Oh God, dang. Yeah, but in the robotic dancing, it all blended into an art form,
Hmm.
right? They were just being the artists of the day, and they wanted to take over popular mainstream culture. How do you do that? You got to get on the radio. You're not getting on the radio unless you have that pop appeal. And New Wave had that in spades.
It did.
You
It
know,
did.
it just really appealed to the youth.
Hmm. But you're right. What you talked about, they were fed up with the parents' music. And
Yeah.
uh, do you think
Right.
maybe
Yeah.
also they were tired of all the weed and cocaine, of the disco and the
Oh,
classic rock scene?
I don't know. I think CBGB's had its fair share of cocaine.
It probably did.
And a lot of these bands were, at least in the States, were CBGB bands.
I'm sure they partied, but the funny thing is you don't look at Elvis Costello and think I want to go smoke a joint with that guy or David Byrne or these. I mean, maybe unless you want to discuss literature with them because that's what you think is going to happen. Whereas if
Yeah,
you
you're
did
probably
this,
taking anti anxiety medication or something,
probably something
more or
there.
less,
Yeah.
you know. And hey, and Weezer, Rivers Cuomo, he's keeping alive that nerdy Buddy Holly, Elvis Costello look.
Yeah, he is. He is. He is.
It's nothing's new. It's all recycled.
But you talk about our parents. But bring this up. We do still have notes here, everybody, and Matt put this in here. Bring this up about the ages of these artists as he has a drink.
Well, it goes into, as I have it. It's water.
That's
It's
fine. I have
water.
a beer.
I do have a little something else here. Oh, okay. Now you're going to force me to admit, yeah, I have a beer.
Ooh, look at that. He's hiding. No, no,
But
no
that's as far
branding
as we'll
from
go into
Matt.
that. Well, it keeps it cold, Jim,
Oh, that's true.
right?
Just
But
drink it
if you go
fast.
back to the beginnings of, oh, that's what gets me in trouble, Jim. You know, you have plenty of audio that shows I am right. I am completely right. So the beginning of punk and new wave, when you think about it, you know, they take into, they're growing up. Debbie Harry, she was born in 45. Elvis Costello
That's
was born
crazy.
in 54. So so Debbie Harry's, you know, when she's like 5 to 10, she's digging up all this 50s music. And you
Mhm.
and Elvis Costello, he's getting psych rock, garage rock. And it's that is something that if you listen to some really good new wave, you're gonna get hints of that here and there. And it all just became this amalgam.
It really surprised me when you put that about Debbie Harry in the notes. And then I went and looked up Rick Ocasek, and he was born a year before her. And what blows my mind about them is that they're older than my parents. And my parents, by
I
1972, my
know,
mother was
right?
25. Yeah. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, you're the second child and you were born in 71. And I can't imagine my mother in
Yeah.
1980 being at the height of her career the way Debbie Harry was with Blondie when she was really kind of in her early 30s. But then I've seen some documentaries and I've read some books and some interviews about CBGBs, and a lot of the young bands that were in there. So David Byrne's younger, the Ramones were younger. Some of these guys were young. They weren't all older, and they all talk about how Debbie Harry was the queen of CBGBs. Basically, what she said was law in there, and nobody touched her. She was off limits to everybody, and I kind of now see that as a respect thing because I'm not saying she's an old woman, but she was older, more experienced than them, and they were young boys, probably in her mind, and she probably treated them that way.
Yeah. Probably, and she probably had this, I mean, she exuded sex appeal, right? And almost
Hmm.
kind of like a standoffishness where, you know, maybe some people were just a little intimidated to approach her.
Yeah, yeah.
So Rick Ocasek from the Cars, he was born in 44,
That's nuts.
1944. Think
Yep.
about this.
Yeah.
What album did the Cars put out in 1984? Heartbeat City, right?
Hmm.
He is 40 years old when that album comes out, and we thought he was the coolest dude on the
We
planet.
did. We had no clue he was 40. He sold it very well
No,
to us. He really did. Yeah.
it's just imagine, you know, you think no, cool has to be this Kurt Cobain, but he
Hmm.
could have been 40 putting out what they did
Yeah.
and still been a success.
Well, coming from that generation as well, but getting there a little bit before everybody else, kind of referred to as the grandfather of New Wave. And a lot of people probably don't associate him with New Wave, but he had a lot of influence over it was David Bowie.
That was a new fact for me. I hadn't really thought about it. I'm like a casual David Bowie fan, but I dug into the Berlin trilogy, which is like his new wave
Hmm.
phase, I guess. And those are damn good albums, I have to say.
Yeah.
It and it and I have to say right off that new wave is, as I'm discovering this week, this is like my favorite genre of music
Okay.
because you got a little bit of everything, and it's
Hmm.
super nostalgia.
Hmm.
It's a super nostalgic hit for me.
But when you look at Bowie and coming out, you have kind of the start of it, but then that was glam rock at the same time. And then
Yeah.
you had the punk scene coming up in America out of CBGBs in New York and then the LA scene. And so you kind of had this US versus the UK. And when it was starting, it was probably about 60% UK, 40% US, or no, the other way around. Probably 60% US, 40 UK. That's the
You
way I would
see,
say it.
I was thinking I was thinking it was 50-50 because they grew up relatively parallel,
Okay.
having a lot of the same influences. But then I came around to thinking that it might be 60-40 UK, and they're not a UK band, but Kraftwerk.
Hmm.
That is where, to me, that is where a lot of the synth bands got in from the UK got, and in the US too. But the UK definitely benefited from having Kraftwerk right
But
there
then
and krautrock in general.
the movement of new wave though could have been pushed by those US, proto punk bands like the MC5, the Stooges, New York Dolls, Velvet Underground. And then if you look back to the UK, so maybe you're right. The
Yep.
influence kind of that pushed. Maybe I mean maybe it was the UK that pushed the sexy into new wave and into that punk rock that pushed it out because you had Roxy music and Roxy
Oh,
music was
big
part of
influence.
that. And,
Yeah,
it's and Brian Eno, who was a big part of all of that scene. Brian Eno produced a lot of the Bowie albums. I think he produced that Berlin trilogy
he
that
did.
you just
Yeah, he
spoke
did.
about, but he also produced one of the Talking Heads albums. So he had an influence over that. He produced a few new wave records, but you're right as well. The push for the sound of the keyboard. So I think if you could kind of glue three pieces together, you could take those American punk prototype bands, you could take Kraftwerk's keyboard influence over everything, and kind of the avant-garde songwriting, sex art swagger of Roxy Music and Bowie, and you
And
get
glam bands in
and glam
general.
bands, yeah, yeah, and then that's kind of where you're gonna get new wave. Does that kind of make sense?
It does, and I think that might be where more. And correct me if I'm wrong. Where more of the makeup came from. I think it was more heavily into the synth bands
Hmm.
that were into, the guys wearing more makeup than, say, like the guys in Blondie, right? They weren't really wearing makeup, but
No,
Flock of Seagulls, Human League,
yeah,
you name it, they were wearing makeup,
it,
folks.
yeah. Well, what's
Try
interesting?
to think of a nice, friendly way to say it
No,
without
no, no,
sounding,
that's fine. I want to.
insincere.
Hey, here I am. If anybody's watching this for the first time, something we didn't bring up at the beginning. I've lived in the UK for almost 15 years now. So I am in the UK. I'm recording from Scotland, and Matt is recording from the US. And we have experiences growing up in the US together, but I have experienced 15 years of UK music over here. And a big difference that you just brought up about the makeup and trying not to say something, disparaging about it. And what it really was the British. The British were the
It
ones that
was,
it
was
was.
it? Okay,
Yeah.
I'm not wrong.
No, you're not. They were the ones wearing all the makeup and kind of doing that. And if you go and look at pictures of the Ramones and you look at the band members from Blondie or the Talking Heads or Elvis
Yeah.
Costello, they're not wearing makeup. They don't care. They're going out on stage and playing their
No.
instruments and going home. The British ones are and
Everything but the big poofy wigs.
well, I think that for over here it comes from Mark Bolan and T Rex because he kind of brought that to the front of the British glam scene.
Oh, well, you got the New York Dolls too.
Well, yeah,
They were so maybe but I think it was more
that's an
widespread in the UK
exception.
still.
I think
Yeah.
the New York Dolls is kind of an
Yeah.
exception to that.
But well, yeah, as far as the makeup, I think so, but they were so influential to the punk bands.
Yeah.
Because Malcolm McLaren, who started up the Sex Pistols, I'm pretty sure it was he managed or some he'd had some connection with the New York Dolls early on before going back and starting the sex clothing store
Okay,
and then starting the sex pistols. So there's across the pond pollination going on.
there is. All right, so I'm going to move us along and keep this going so that we can stay within a time frame before we get carried away because we do know
Yeah.
we're on video now. And we're kind of going to cut it off here a little bit because there are going to be trends. There are going to be directions this goes in. New wave is going to transcend into what's called the next British invasion. And we're going to save that for the next show. We'll talk about this at the end. But if you're listening for the first time, or I keep listening, but here I'm looking at myself on video. If you're watching us, it's common for Matt and I to choose 5 songs to talk about within a genre, and we discuss these songs a little bit with one another, and we make a playlist and we throw it up on Spotify. And if you want to go listen to it, you're welcome to. We'll put this link in. We have a Facebook group page that's a private page. You have to answer a question to join, but we'd love it if you did because we run polls on it. And if you want to come and harass us on that page, it would make it a lot more exciting to us, even if we did moan about it at first. It'd probably make it more interesting. But we move on to the 5 songs, and we pick 5 songs each episode that kind of reflect what we liked most out of that period right now. We haven't made the playlist yet because I didn't think it was worth just doing it with 10 songs of emo from the first episode. I said it
Yeah.
again. I'm sorry.
Dang it, Jim.
But maybe we can get 20 songs going after this. And then we're, like I said, maybe the next, the British invasion will go after that. And we've kind of got a roadmap ahead of us as to where we're going to go.
Yeah, I'm glad we decided to do that British invasion one because new wave was getting cumbersome
Yeah.
to draw a line in the sand as to how far are we going to go with this thing
Well,
because it goes well into the 80s.
people watching this show for the first time, you will find out that Matt is a completist and I have to shut him off. He listened to the Berlin trilogy this week. That blows my mind that you listened to 3 David Bowie albums.
I know because that's the most I've ever listened to David
Yeah,
Bowie in one sitting.
yeah. I'm impressed. I'm impressed. Your dedication is admirable.
Hey, I got nothing else to do. Might as well put on some music,
I,
see
I
what everybody else is clamoring on about.
I appreciate it because I'm lazy. I mean, I do listen to a lot of music and I listen to a lot of stuff that is new to me. A lot of this music, because you are a fan of this age of new wave from the mid 70s until the early 80s. I didn't really get this in my growing up years. And I think you
Mhm.
caught on to a little bit more than I did because you're just a year older than me, but you had
That,
maybe
that that can make a big difference.
it
I had
can.
some older friends, older cousins, and
Yeah.
everything, and it did help me like discover things.
Yep. All right, so we're going to talk about our 5 songs. And in our notes, we're pretty bad at separating our songs one to the next. Do you want me to just go through my 5 and then you can go through yours?
I'm fine with that. Hey, let's try something new. We
Let's try
usually
something new.
alternate,
We'll,
but
we'll
yeah,
just
let's
go
try
through.
something.
So, the first song that I'm going to talk about is you can't have a show about new wave in this era without the Talking Heads.
No, you
And
can't.
I am going to pick the live version from their Stop Making Sense movie, directed by Jonathan Demme, called Slippery People. The Talking Heads were masters of taking new wave and dabbling with different world rhythms. And there was something really sensual about Tina Weymouth's bass grooves that settled somewhere between punk and disco. And the Stop Making Sense of Slippery People is, and I'm looking at my notes here because I want to make sure I get this right. It is, I don't need to say, it's my favorite live recording of any song of all time. I love it. There's something about that sound, the syncopation, about 3/4 of the way through when you have headphones on. It's amazing. But then even when you're sitting and you're watching it, and I recommend this is the way you experience it, there are some of the most incredible musicians on stage playing this song all together. Because if you've not seen it, the show starts with just David Byrne by himself with a guitar playing Psycho Killer, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. The Talking Heads, the 4-piece come together, and then it grows into a stage with maybe about 10 to 12 musicians, backup singers, and some of the best studio musicians of all time in that era. And I've never seen so many people so talented on stage smiling and having fun playing music
Fun.
together as they do while they're playing this song. So my first choice is Talking Heads, Slippery People.
Good choice. You're right. This is one of the best live albums ever. Even if you're not a fan, and I understand because I know quite a few people that Talking Heads, that's just a little too weird for me. And I get it. I understand, but everybody can be wrong about a few things. But but just listen to yourself and remind yourself that this is a live album
Hmm.
and it is an absolutely flawless recording,
Hmm.
especially as you were saying, when you get that many people on stage you have to be blown away by Slippery People
Yeah.
just because this live version it is so intricate yet it's perfect, right?
Hmm.
The thought and the work that went into not just the whole show but just this one song, it's second to none. It's awesome.
Yeah. It's awesome. So my second song is going to be slightly controversial, but it isn't to me. It is the song Killing an Arab by The Cure. This song basically got banned. It was censored out. You came to me this week, talking about not being able to find it. It was actually taken over by racists because of the first Gulf War. So killing an Arab, I guess, was funny to people, which is sickening. And after 9/11, Robert Smith of The Cure wrote this song, the lyrics to this song, based upon the French novel, and I wrote it down here, "Les Étrangers." I'm probably saying that wrong, but it's "The Stranger" by Albert Camus. So the character in the book is called the Arab, and it was about a part in the book that takes place where a guy kills another guy on the beach, and he's just describing what is played out in the book in this song. But because of the subject matter being overridden, or what's the word I want, like stolen by people who want to use it for racist intentions, it got taken off the radio. It got taken off of their albums. It got stopped. Airplay went away. I remember the very first time I got a Cure cassette tape in America. It was here, this right here, Standing on the Beach, the singles. No, I have the UK version that has Killing an Arab on it, no problem. But the American one had it as well. But there was a sticker that they had to put on it that said, "This song's not intended to be racist." And they had to put that out there so that they would, as a disclaimer. What I really like, though, the story about this song is that I think it was last year, The Cure played Hyde Park. And I heard a story about a young kid saying to his dad, "Oh, Dad, I'm going to go see The Cure play Hyde Park. You want to come with me?" And Dad said, "No, I'm not going to go see him. I saw him back in the day. Besides, they're not going to play Killing an Arab." Their last encore that evening, they played Killing an Arab. And that was probably, you talk about a big middle finger. That was them saying,
Yeah.
"You know what? That's our song. We wrote this song. We know what this song means, and we're going to sing it. And we're going to take it back from the people who took it away from us."
And I think it's important to get the story of what the song is about out there instead of people making it. And yeah, I know it's art and people should be allowed to interpret it one way, but you don't have to be a certain way
Mm-hmm.
when you interpret something. So is this song available on UK
Yeah,
Spotify in
yeah, yeah.
UK?
No problem finding it
So it's
here.
just the States. So what I was able to find is there was a cover version on the US version of Spotify,
Okay.
and it's off a soundtrack for a TV show. And I'm like, well, why does it make it? Why is it okay here, but why can't it be okay for the Cure? So it just got me wondering if the UK or if the Cure pulled it themselves to just take it out of people's hands
Maybe they did pull it
in a
because of
streaming
some
way.
sentiments. Maybe because it was the Gulf War and 9/11. The Cure maybe pulled it
Yeah,
themselves because of that. That the group of people may have come out of America who are using it that way. So it wouldn't
yep.
surprise me.
But hey, as Jim knows, I am not a Cure fan, but I am. I've been making strides. I will admit, I never really listened to this song before. It's a good song.
Yeah.
And when I listen to the live album that's off, I listen to a lot of it. I'm like, you know what? I'm not gonna say I'm a Cure fan, but I will admit I like a lot more songs than I thought I did and more than I used to. And I still like a lot more Cure songs than I do of say like the Smiths.
Oh yeah, we won't go down that. We'll go that when we come to the next British invasion. We
Yeah.
can we can get there. But I'll go on to the next song. The next song, I couldn't do this without talking about Adam and the Ants. We've talked about the British side of new wave, and really, we didn't talk about any British bands that were part of the new wave movement. We talked about the Godfather and the influence, but I think Adam and the Ants were the biggest of the British bands that kind of broke in the United States before we get to the next phase of new wave for the next show. Problem is that it's still kind of, or I wouldn't say this song. The song I chose was "Hello, I Love You." It's a cover by The Doors, and I will admit I'm kind of being a little.
And the real reason why he chose the
I
song.
love The Doors, you know.
He
But
does.
yes, but Adam and the Ants, they still had strong punk roots even in their new wave, and they kind of brought that underground new wave scene to the peak of the charts in the UK. A great story is they were originally called Bazooka Joe. I don't know if it was the whole lineup, but I do think it was the original lineup or close to it of Adam and the Ants. And the very first Sex Pistols gig was opening for Bazooka Joe. But the deal
Really?
was, yeah, it was, yep. The deal was that Sex Pistols asked Adam and the Ants if they could use their equipment. And Adam and the Ants said, sure, go ahead, use our equipment before the show starts. Got
Oh.
up on stage, Sex Pistols started playing. Before you knew it, they started destroying all of the equipment, kicking over amps, smashing their guitars.
Oh.
And needless to say, the show did not finish. There wound up being a brawl between both bands, as you would probably expect. That is not just an Adam and the Ant story, because that is such a Sex Pistols story at the
Oh
same
yeah,
time.
completely.
So, but anyway, I thought I had to include Adam and the Ants in this playlist, but I did choose this cover of The Doors' Hello, I Love You. I actually think it's a really good cover, and it keeps that new wave sound in there, but I think it keeps the soul of the original song intact.
I'll be honest, I thought I was gonna hate this cover, and I was gonna have to come to Jim and say, why'd you choose this? Well, then I'm like, oh wait, it's a cover. But dang, I wasn't quite prepared for how well his voice fit the song.
It works.
It's
Yeah.
kind of like a not overly dramatic, but it's like a dramatic crooning,
Hmm.
and it's a pickup song. Hello, I love you.
Yeah.
Uh, that came from a 60s Roadhouse, and it now it's in an 80s go-go. Right?
Yep.
But I love the way the guitar interpretation of the main lick.
Yeah, it's really cool.
It turns it on its head. I won't say it quite makes its own because that "Hello, I love you" that's so
It
iconic.
is.
I think if you were to sing it any other way, you might get beat up.
Yeah. But he does it justice.
Yeah,
So
he does.
good stuff.
And more makeup, more
And
makeup.
yeah, but he has a lot of it. He's the makeup guy.
He is.
He is. After that, I am going to add the song Just What I Needed by The Cars. I know you and I are both big fans of this song, that debut album. And what The Cars were able to do and bring attention to new wave, when I talk and make this joke about classic rock, The Cars managed to sound new wave, but wind up on that radio station with Led Zeppelin and Journey and everything. But they brought that really kind of mellow, let me say this right, they brought that melodic synth into
Yeah.
that. So that's where the Cars kind of are considered new wave. I mean, Rick Ocasek was a keyboard player. And if you go and listen to Cars, you might think, oh, wait a minute, they're a classic rock band. No, there's a lot of weird experimental keyboard music that you don't hear that aren't the hits from the radio. But Just What I Needed is probably the best song to break you into the Cars if you've never listened to them before, because it wound up being big on this radio station. There was a disc jockey in Boston who was friends with one of Rick Ocasek's friends. Rick Ocasek at the time was living in a commune somewhere in Boston, I guess, and maybe he lived in the basement, and he produced a demo of this in his basement, and this is what got handed over to the DJ. And the DJ had a 2 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon slot on Boston radio, played it. And the next thing they knew, they were getting a bunch of phone calls for people to play it again. And it wound up becoming a massive hit. So I really think that it's cool. Everybody dreams of that who's ever played music. I've handed cassette tapes over to
That's the
people.
dream.
Yeah, you made a demo. You're just sitting there. You didn't
Yeah.
even work for it. You didn't have to go play 100 shows, and the next thing you know, you're getting called up because somebody put your song on the radio. But it's great. It's such a good song. It's got such a strong hook. Awesome.
Yeah, the cars fit in classic rock, new wave, kind of punk. I mean, they fit everywhere. They're great.
Mhm.
So, Jim, have you ever been driving down the road and this song comes on the radio and you just start mimicking that keyboard sound?
Yeah, I
But you
think
do it with gusto at the top of your lungs. You
I
don't
think
care
I
if
might do it
anybody's
if I'm
watching.
vacuuming the house. I don't think I need to be driving down the road. If I just hear it, you sing along to it. Yeah,
Yeah, man, it creates a vibe.
it
The
does.
Cars are a great band. Good song.
All right. So my last one, my last song, my fifth song is Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, or I'm just going to say OMD. And the song is Enola Gay. This song has that full on British synth sound. So sorry, OMD, Adam and the Ants weren't the only ones doing it. You guys had this song as well. It was a pretty big hit over here. I'm not quite sure how big it was in America, but maybe because it was an anti-war song about the plane Enola Gay that dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima. The name Enola was the pilot, or actually the whole name Enola Gay was the pilot's mother's name. And the bomb that got dropped was called Little Boy. That's what they nicknamed it. So there's a lyric in the song. It starts off, Enola Gay, you should have stayed home yesterday. So they're saying you never should have gone and done what you did. But then, is mother proud of little boy today? The kiss you give is never going to go away. It's so poignant and it's hiding this really strong theme behind this simple little synth melody. Have you ever seen Saturday Night Live Christmas episodes where Chris Kattan and Tracy Morgan and Jimmy Fallon play on the keyboard Horatio Sands and they sing a Christmas song? One of them's just playing a little
No,
keyboard. Oh, okay. So then it wouldn't be funny to you. But
no.
if anybody out there has ever seen this Christmas or the melody of this song reminds me of that. One of the things that really upsets me is it's actually on commercials over here in the UK all the time. So you hear that little
Oh, wow.
and it's on here, but
See, it's not just for the cars.
no, it isn't. But it goes to show how strong of a keyboard, melody theme that is, a synth theme that it is.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, great song. I love it.
And here we were, a few minutes ago talking about how New Wave was bringing the fun, right? And the humor, right? uh, OMD brought the darkness
They did.
here. They borrowed a little bit of post-punk here, lyrically at least, because
Mhm.
musically it's like skipping in the park on a sunny day.
It is.
If you're
Yeah.
not if you're not going to pay attention and just hum along to that keyboard,
Mhm.
you would probably go, "Oh, that's not funny."
No.
None, none of this should be in my fun music at all.
Okay. So I've seen your first song of your five. You're going to bring us to
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, Devo, whip it.
That's so fun.
There's so many songs, so many ways I could have, picked a deep track from Devo because there's so many good songs, but this is not the time for a deep cut because whip it's the obvious choice, right? I don't know anybody our age who didn't dig it and wanted an energy dome. Like, hey, got to get used to this pointing thing behind me now. But I remember Mark, probably in the late 80s, he brought home this cassette of a live Devo recording,
Mhm.
and I'm like, "Ooh, Devo." This is hair metal mad going, Devo. Oh man, come on. But then I listened to it and I'm like, whip it. Oh, I still love that song.
It's fun.
And then it made me realize, Devo just has a lot of great stuff, and it made me start digging into him.
Yeah.
And it's Devo's what I really love about New Wave. It's that odd, it's the quirky, the staccato stabbing keyboard at times, the
Mhm.
wavering hypnotic
Mhm.
sense of it all. When the kids were younger, I remember going to Little League games and sitting leaning against the outfield fence and just got my earbuds in at the time. One of the other dads is walking by, stops to talk, and he says, "What are you listening to?" I said, "Oh, Devo." And he just started laughing his ass off. He was like, I didn't think that was the last thing I thought anybody would ever say when I asked that question. But he says, "I really love Devo.
Yeah.
I wish more people listen to Devo." I'm like, "You're right."
Yeah.
Hey, unexpected answer. And it was an unexpected response.
Great
But
song.
hey, yeah,
Yeah.
love it.
I don't have anything to add to that. That's great. Love it.
It's great. Human League is my second, and with Don't You Want Me, I got the 45 around here, so I had to dig it out.
That's good.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, because I still remember every single little pop and crackle that it used to have when I was a kid. Uh, there came a point in my life when I had moved past synth music. It was generally when I got into metal, and I'm like, oh no, I can't listen to that. That's not macho. That's not manly, right? But I have all the patience in the world for synth in these older songs because it gives me that nostalgia rush. And I remember seeing the video for this song, and you got the two guys and the two girls, and
Mhm.
immediately I'm thinking, oh, ABBA. This is just like ABBA, right?
That's what your kid brain will think at the time. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Exactly, exactly. My third one will be Elvis Costello's "Pump It Up,"
Yeah.
rockin', stomping. It's the perfect blend of that rock
Hmm.
with that. Well, it's an organ, but I'll say keyboard. This is my sweet spot for new wave. It's still just a little bit angry, still, but a lot snarky. And that wavy drone choppiness, it creates tension without being overbearing. Great bass line. This is Elvis at his sneering best.
I
Love
got
that one.
a chance to play this in one of the last cover bands I played in before I left the States as a bass player. And if people are watching this, you'll discover that Matt and I are both bass players. This was one of my most enjoyable songs I've ever gotten to play as a cover song. It's just
Oh,
one of
it's
those, it's
fun.
so much fun to play. Yeah,
Yeah, highlights the bass.
it does.
What's wrong with that?
Yep.
And then moving on, Gary Newman's Cars. Give me you want to talk about iconic keyboard lines, right?
It's four
Gary
notes.
Newman was
One, two, three, four.
5 6.
Yeah, well, that's the.
Yeah, that's the turnaround. Yeah, but anyways, so I didn't know this when I was younger. It was in my 20s when I first heard this. My brother-in-law would put it on, and I'm like, wait, what is this? I was thinking it was something new, and I'm like, no, this is not. And he was saying, no, this isn't new at all. And I absolutely love this album. Again, it's got a good mix of. There's a lot of keyboards, but there's still a backbone of acoustic instruments. Cars immediately stuck out to me.
Mhm.
That pulsating keyboard in the back. It's hypnotizing.
It's really
And his
good.
vocal delivery, synth can be cold and emotionless, and his vocal delivery matches that.
Yep.
It's very mechanical, android like, uh, but it pairs well with real bass and drums.
Hmm.
And if you don't know Two Boy Army, the band that he was in before this, check them out. That's very good new wave
That
too.
you just brought that to my attention. I will go look for it. Two
Yeah,
Boy
Two
Army.
Boy Army.
Sounds good.
Yep. And my final one is the Queen, Blondie, Heart of Glass. New Wave gone disco. It was either this or Call Me, and then I'm like, no, it's got to be Heart of
It's got to
Glass.
be Heart of
This
Glass.
is because I have a very specific memory of the first time I heard it. We were at my Aunt Linda's house. I can't remember. It was probably my cousin Jeff's birthday, and one of my cousins, Michelle, she was at least 6 years older than I was. She put this on, and I was like, wait, what is this? This is special. I can tell this is special. And I got a real kick out of the lyrics soon to find out it was a pain in the ass. I'm like, little 7-year-old me's giggling his tail off, going, she said ass. And they tried a lot of different versions of this song, reggae. There's a slow rock version called I Had a Love, and it just isn't the same once you know this. I mean, this is a perfect little disco groove in here.
Th-
Great new wave song.
this song's always been in my ether. I don't know if I have not known this song existing in my life. It seems like it's
Yeah.
always been there. And I'm glad you chose this because I don't know the first time I heard this, but I do know the first time I heard Call Me was when I was too young to be watching Richard Gere and
Oh,
Lauren Hutton
yeah.
at the beginning of American Gigolo on
Yeah.
HBO when I wasn't supposed to be
Yeah.
watching it as a 7, 8 year
Yeah.
old kid.
And they wrote that song with Giorgio Moroder. He's like considered a big guy in the disco world.
Okay.
So
Okay. That's great. Well, there we go. That's our 5 songs a piece. And we are at the end of talking about, well, we're going to say we're at the end of part 1 kind of New Wave.
Yeah, we are because there is so much more. We had to draw the line. So we're going to talk about the second British invasion, maybe dip into romantics, or maybe Jim will say, "No, Matt, that's another show. We'll save that for another show because then we can actually give bands the proper attention that they need."
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I think we can fit it all in because I do think the New Romantics are part of that British new next
They
British
are.
invasion
They
that came
really are.
over with that. So I think that'll be part of that.
They really are. So
So,
Jim is going to go run and get his mascara and everything
oh,
and
I'll
his
be ready
promotion.
for it. Yeah, I will be. You're lucky I didn't have it, you know. But hey, you know, everybody else is lucky since they have to see us on YouTube that Matt's wearing a shirt tonight because
Hey, hey, don't be selling state secrets here,
yeah,
Jim.
well,
Come on.
I'm never wearing pants because you know it's like a Zoom meeting.
Exactly. Why bother? They're just coming off anyway.
They are.
At the end of the day. At the
Yeah.
end of the day, folks.
Okay, everybody, we are going to wrap this up. We want to thank you for checking us out on YouTube. If you made it this far,
Hey,
wow. We're
thank
really,
you.
it's the first time we've
Thank
done this on
you.
video. And we hope
Yeah.
we didn't scare you away from checking out the future shows that we come along with. 3 years of doing this on audio, and we finally got to a point where we feel like we're almost okay at what we do, that we're brave enough to
Yeah.
come on and do
It really
this.
is a bravery
It
thing,
is. It
right?
is. If you don't mind a couple of 50-plus-year-old guys sitting around talking about music, maybe you would have enjoyed seeing us try to talk about music from the 2010s and wrap our head around some of that.
Oh, yeah, because we are not afraid of being the old man yelling at clouds.
No, and there's a reason why those are going to stay audio because they can stay explicit and Matt can swear.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, you gave in a couple times.
I definitely did. I definitely did.
Well, no, listen to it, but just be warned. If you go into the Summer of Love episode, yeah,
Yeah.
there was some imbibing going on.
Yeah, there is. So we're not going to do the next video. We'll actually go to our album anniversaries. And so the next episode you're going to see will be our album anniversary episode, and that will be focused on anniversaries that are celebrated in the month of March. We go back 25 years and then 5 years beyond that. So you're not going to hear anything from before the year 2000, and that's where we will push back 2000, 95, 90, and so forth through this year, and we'll just keep going every other show. And then beyond that, we will come back to the new British invasion, which I don't think will need as much research because
Kind of did it.
MTV had a big hand in our lives when this was all coming across as well. Yeah. So, all right, Matt. Now you get to say goodbye to the camera. Hey, everybody.
Oh, goodbye,
Yeah.
goodbye, camera. Goodbye, Jim. Goodbye, everybody listening. I feel like I'm on Romper Room. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm that
Goodbye,
one.
everybody.
So, goodbye, everybody. Remember, please, if you could do us a favor, hit the like, subscribe, tell a friend, share, whatever you can do to help us grow. We would really appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of JAM Yearbook. Go listen to some new wave. It's awesome.
Peace, love, and podcast.
Lost in a memory, caught in a reverie.